Welcome to the Reflective Soul Podcast. I'm Dr. Nick Latursky, your guide on this journey through the intersection of psyche and spirit. Here we explore the depths of the human soul, uncovering the wisdom of symbols, dreams, myths, archetypes, and sacred stories. Whether you're seeking personal transformation, spiritual insight, or simply inspiration, this is a place for reflection, connection, and growth. Let's begin. Welcome again to the Reflective Soul Podcast. Today I'm interviewing Jacob Williamson, a friend of mine who's also the host of the Dispatchist podcast, a friendly conversation about hell. Jacob.
I have a small correction. The Reverend Jacob Williamson.
Oh, the Reverend Jacob Williamson.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. And Jacob and I will be talking about his spiritual journey. And if you haven't listened to the Dispatches podcast, I really encourage you to do so. It's a terrific podcast. Jacob and his co-hosts are very funny, but also deliver a wonderful amount of information.
Yeah, just never late at night while driving. That's a recommendation.
Okay, sounds good. So, Jacob, let's just to kick things off, tell me about your earliest impressions around religion and spirituality, earliest experiences.
Earliest? Well, my next door neighbors when I was 5 kept a stash of Jack Chick tracts around, which I dearly enjoyed at the time.
I love the Jack Chick tracts.
I used to collect them, but they started becoming too real for me. My best friend growing up, I met her when I was 1 and she was 0. I knew her for like 15 years or so. Her mother was probably in a fundamentalist Christian cult. And I remember her exercising me once because I had a stomach ache. And this was not the last time I've been exercised. But those are kind of pre-memories. I remember being baptized by an Episcopal church when I was like, my sister was born, so maybe 10.
Okay.
And that kind of stuck in my mind. I do really appreciate the Christian church, particularly the liturgical Catholic Episcopal branches, which are just so much lore, so much fun to read. Sure.
So that Episcopal baptism at around the age 10, what was that like for you? What was the experience like?
I was old enough to appreciate it. It was kind of, stand in front of the crowd and be welcomed into the church. I'm familiar with the language of the kind of, we celebrate this child, we will protect him from the darkness, and he'll be part of the church. And I was at an age where I could appreciate the community aspect of that religion. Also, I think I'm maybe very sensitive to the oil of chrism because it left a blazing red cross on my forehead for a few hours.
Oh my, okay. Yeah. I hope there are pictures of that somewhere.
No, it's been a day.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, you could use that in your podcast, but okay.
It's come up.
Okay. So did you continue to fellowship with the Episcopalian Church then after that, or?
Yes. My mother was kind of the Sunday school director type person, and I would regularly do Sunday schools or just kind of help take care of kids when they were too frantic to stay in church. I stayed in this kind of little church in the countryside until I was, I guess, 16, maybe 15-ish or so. But because my family had some relationship marriage issues, and we were kind of disinvited to be there after a time. And so we moved to the big downtown church, St. David's, which is, is almost Texas's cathedral. It's pretty big and central. My family has a very long, dark history with church politics, and it never really goes well for us. But I stayed there as kind of like a, youth leader type person. And yeah, that was me until about, college age, even later than that, because I was a security guard there for a time. But eventually, I'm gay and read too much Nietzsche in college, and that kind of broke down my relationship with Christianity as a practitioner. I still appreciate the lore and the ceremony and incense and things like that. And I've been
So,
agnostic for like 15 years after that, I guess, longer.
okay. Say more about that.
Clarify?
Yeah, well, not just clarify, but just sort of what brought you. I mean, you said that you were gay, so I'm assuming there was some conflict there with the Episcopalian.
Conceptually, there was conflict. I felt like I felt like the Christian church was kind of down on gays, and this was in the around 2005 or so, and there was a lot more kind of turmoil in the air there, and the argument over the Episcopal bishop was still out there. But I think maybe, I mean, I'm from Austin, which is a very liberal town, and I think most of the conflict between the church and homosexuality for me was in my own head and trying to come to terms with who I was and not feeling like the church was a safe place to explore. Also, I went to a singles group there, and it was all like 70-year-old women, so that's a running church problem as well. But Nietzsche has kind of the idea built in that religion is used to control the masses and keep the rich in power. And I couldn't unhear that once it was kind of in my head. And it made the entire thing seem just a little bit false as something I believe, which is not to say I disbelieve in any of it. But it wasn't for me at that point. I finally left the church, and my mother was extremely irritated that I wasn't going to be helping her out in her church bookshop or anything like that. So that was kind of my break there. And I went on to the Unitarian Universalists, who I really adore their capacity for argument and comparative religion. But I left that one too because I wasn't just not feeding myself enough there. And I'd also built some other communities in the kind of the fandom community and things like that. So it just seemed less necessary.
Okay. So I hear that a lot from clients that I work with in spiritual guidance that the tradition they were with just wasn't feeding them. Say more about that.
Well, I don't know if it's simply just evolution of belief or throwing away things of childhood or something like that. I just couldn't sustain. Well, I really, I stopped believing in the marketing of Christianity more than anything else. I said my family has a lot of trouble with church politics, and my mother had gotten fired by her church for no clear reason. And I feel, I mean, it's not explicitly stated, but it does feel like there's this deep down embedded idea that Christianity and the church will make everything better. Right. And, they also say, life is full of trials and you have to suffer a little bit. But at the same time, there's this double-edged, God will provide everything right this second, and like a magic spell. And there'd be happiness there. And that kind of relentless marketing in the face of what seemed kind of like cruelty from church leadership, I couldn't handle it. And it was the discrepancy between marketing and reality that really kind of made things break in the end.
Sure, makes sense. And I like what you're saying there about, the idea of the we suffer now for a promised reward in the afterlife. While at the same time trying to say we're going to solve all your problems right now.
That is the single biggest argument against Pascal's wager for me. Pascal's wager being the whole, you should believe in something, preferably God. Otherwise, when you die and go to hell, you'll go to hell. So hedge your bets and believe in God. The flip side of that is while having that conversation, no one tends to talk about the very high cost of the Christian faith. Or a lot of more disciplined faiths. The things you give up are huge.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm listening right now to some of Jung's writings. Revisiting them, and it really struck me the other day that in his early writings he actually made the comment that it was necessary for a good man to believe in God. And I don't think he stayed with that position at all. But it was interesting that was what he actually put into print in the early 20th century.
I really believed that until I was like 20-ish or so. But a lot of that was my own internal argument. This kind of belief that religion is the primary transmission of an ethical code. Can you be ethical with it while being an atheist? Let me try that again. Can you be ethical and be an atheist at the same time? There was a long period of my life where I would have said no. Now I kind of think an atheist has to be the most ethical person there is because they don't have a backup option later on.
Sure. Yeah, they don't have that hidden motive behind it.
Right.
Either, of again, the future reward.
And another thing that's just kind of very difficult to unpack is the Cartesian dualism that kind of fueled like the witch trials, the belief that you can do good things for the soul while ignoring the body. That's another kind of dark side of this idea that ethics are tied to religion so closely.
Yeah, I think that's that's an interesting point. I think the Cartesian idea really sort of does a lot to destroy spirituality and religion.
I think so, or at least it leads it down some very dark paths. And I am not a Christian basher.
Sure.
I try to avoid that unless I'm like really in a dark place. But it does a lot of good. There's a lot of good there. Received values can be powerful. Corporate religion, that is together religion, has strengths that a solitary practice just can never get to.
Yeah, very true. I mean, I think, I know for myself, I spent, after leaving a very restrictive faith, I spent several years really just doing my own thing. And eventually really kind of yearned for community.
Yeah, and the church is so good at that.
Yeah. And I've managed to find a community that is supportive of me as an individual and willing to let me do my own thing, which is a nice balance.
Yay. Of course, you also create your own communities too, so that's something.
There is that. Yeah. I think that's sort of the job we all have, is to create our own community. So, reading Nietzsche, coming out as gay, where did it go from there? I mean, you mentioned, being semi-agnostic, but I'm just from what I know of you, I'm guessing there's more to the story than that.
I mean, I was kind of drifting for like 10 years, I guess, 20, 30, maybe more like 20 years. I forget how old I am. And I still haven't really won the battle against agnosticism. I just know that I have a place in my soul, heart, that needs to worship something. Like I need that higher power, or at least the actions of service to a higher being, or maybe not a higher being. That's like a part of me. And I tried like paganism and Wicca, but there's a certain level of snark in my life. You might have caught that in my podcast. And I found that like Dianic, Gardnerian, nature worshipy Wicca, which is also very optimistic, very airy-fairy at times, also didn't feel right to me. And it made me giggle, honestly. I've gotten a little over that, but I didn't find my path there. And then I joined the Unitarian Universalists and worked with their pagan group an awful lot because I love ritual craft and that sort of thing. The Unitarian Universalists they really are not good at ritual. Like, that is not their thing. Frozen Chosen is more their path. But I got to work with CUPS, the Circle of Unitarian Universalist Pagans, and ran a couple of church services under them and helped like bring people into that community that might not have found it. It's there was a women's spirituality group there that was very Dianic, and really kind of cold and frosty. I am, as you might have guessed, male. And that was like not a great fit, but they would participate in some of the bigger things like the Yule rituals and such. And I ended up running a couple of Yule rituals as like the leader, and that was really fun. And still not really believing anything, but I really enjoy public ritual. I think it's a place where extroverts can really shine. And that's been good to help with. I still haven't really shaken off agnosticism. And in 2020, I started the Dispatches podcast with Victoria and Jaman, my co-hosts. And that was a journey into infernalogy and like the dark side of religion, fighting against Pascal's wager, unpacking the idea of damnation. Oh, I lost him. I'm not that boring, am I?
No, you're fine. I unfortunately, my gardener is outside with the leaf blower. Of all the good times, right? So I just pulled down the shade to filter that out.
So I kind of entered the 2020 period where the entire universe fell apart because of COVID and other things. With, my built-in love of religious lore, religious trivia, fantasy, magic, and kind of leaning towards dark things anyway. And it got just darker and darker. Oh, we were there. You probably remembered this, but like round about 2021, we started to hit the Black Lives Matter movement, and around about 2022, my fandom community really just doubled down on that to a degree that I wasn't prepared for. And despite the fact that we have so many elderly gay males running things, there was a lot of movement against. There was a lot of ageism and movement against, this privileged class. And I got kicked out of my own fandom for a time, which made me very upset as I helped build it. And I'm a furry, for what it's worth. And at the same time, I was having a lot of challenges at work, policies that just made no damn sense to me that I was kind of fighting against, but couldn't really overcome because of the status quo. And then I was listening to political news on the radio one day, and just there was so much hatred being led by people calling themselves Christian. At some point in a long ride home, I looked at my life, my world, and says, none of this makes sense. No mainstream religion has answers that fit what I'm seeing in the world. I'm going to go to demon worship because it's frankly a lot more fun, and it's approachable. It's sort of like saints. It's like saint worship with more hooves, and I kind of stuck with that. And I still don't know what I believe, but I like the stories. I like the characters. I like the hooves, and I like the kind of edgy, wearing black leather type aspects of that path, without actually. I can't really buy into like the darkness and rebellion so much, but I consider myself at this point either an agnostic that's trying to escape, or a right-hand path demon worshiper.
Okay.
Because that makes me laugh. But I'll stick with it because I had no better words for where I've ended up.
Sure. Yeah, so you said a whole lot of great stuff to unpack there.
I didn't breathe once.
That's okay. So you went back and you said how there is a part that you recognize in yourself that really wants to worship something.
Yeah.
That really wants that connection, and it really makes me think of Jung and the religious instinct.
Oh, it would, wouldn't it?
And well, of course I go to Jung. That's my default. But for him, of course, he took the term the numinous.
That's such a good word.
It is. It really is. It gets again, it was Rudolf Otto rather created it to get away from holy, the very religious connotation, and still wanted to get into this idea of what he considered something bigger than us, more powerful than us, beyond our understanding. And what I'm hearing you say is really along what Jung was saying, is that we naturally want to connect with something greater than ourselves. It becomes trying to find out what that is, I guess.
I think faith gives you this sense of control over your life in a way that maybe atheism doesn't. I mean, if you're putting your hands in some third-party entity, you're clearly not in full control over your life, but that gives you a sense of pattern, of order and shape and destiny that's useful as a way of making sense of your world. And religion is, in many ways, it's a schema to like understand tomorrow and place bets against it. There's another writer, Jesse Bering. Do you know him?
I don't.
He's Scientific American's evolutionary sexologist, and has written a lot of really delightful books that are very heavily sex oriented. But one of his first, I
Oh,
think his first,
is this a Sex at Dawn?
no, that's someone
Okay.
else. This is
Okay.
Why is the Penis Shaped Like That?
Oh, okay.
And Perv. Perv is kind of a downer. He leans very heavily on suicide in that one. But the first one's a lot of fun. But his first book was I don't remember. I don't remember the title, and I haven't actually read it. I've just heard him talk about it. But it was about the biological brain chemistry in transcendence. It's like it's like the religion gene, the physiological response that is transcendence, and he was kind of studying that. And there is definitely something there, which you can get standing on a mountain, or
Hmm.
if you're lucky, you can get even at the communion rail, despite the fact you've done that 100 times.
Sure. Yeah, it reminds me of the work of Michael Ferguson. It's an acquaintance of mine.
Oh,
He's worked with what's called the Religious Brain Project,
interesting.
and that's been their whole thing is actually doing the brain measurements, the is it EKG,
Huh.
whatever it is, but actually identifying what parts of the brain light up when people are praying or having these other religious experiences.
I wonder if you can tell me what's wrong with my head.
Yeah, and when he first started with that project, he and I had some back and forth, about, gee, are you just trying to reduce this to brain activity? And he said, no, quite the opposite. He actually was not trying to do that, but at the same time, he was recognizing that yes, there is this, built-in peace,
Yeah. Well,
this
and the dark side of
hardwiring.
it, it's also kind of like a craving for answers.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, I think left liberal religion does not go in for answers.
Hmm.
Certainly, magical paths and pagan paths don't. Easy answers are not a part of our world, and that's something that religion offers as part of kind of the social transmission virus thing that it does.
Hmm.
And I think that hurts Unitarian Universalism and liturgical paths because they don't have quick answers.
Yeah.
Even if you go to the Episcopal Church and say, the Apostles' Creed that, we believe in the Holy Spirit, et cetera, it can be qualified.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, especially in Unitarian Universalism, where there's a whole lot of freedom there to, figure out your own path.
Yeah, I love it was a New Yorker cartoon about UU's, surprise, and it was like Unitarian heaven, and there was one fork in the road that had a sign saying "This way to heaven," and one fork in the road that said "Discussions about heaven," and they were all going to the right.
Nice. Okay. So another thing you said was about ritual,
Hmm.
and I really relate. I am a huge lover of ritual. That's the one thing I miss from my former spiritual tradition
Hmm.
is a sense of high ritual in community that I'm no longer able to participate in, and I honestly kind of miss in a lot of ways.
It's something to reach out for, at least, for the major holidays. You don't have to go back to a faith that you consider,
Right.
can I say Mormon?
Sure.
Okay, you don't have to go back to the Mormon Church and celebrate the rituals they do, but I, there's something local. You're in a hipster town. There's got to be local things that celebrate the observations you need, and the sacraments are. Oh, this is a place where I think paganism breaks down. The sacraments of the church are life milestones: joining community,
Right.
growing up, marriage, adulting, and death. Even
Hmm.
they're the milestones that some pagan paths that are fundamentally solitary can't necessarily reach out to.
Right. Right. I mean, I
Um,
know for myself, one way I've found of satisfying that is I'm a member of the OTO, and
mhm.
I am participating in the Gnostic Mass,
Oh,
for example,
neat.
is a terrific. I don't know if you ever attended a Gnostic Mass or not.
I haven't. I learned more about the OTO kind of while I'm in my own little transitional thing, but our co-host Jamin has been to a few of them.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm a terrible Crowleyite, but I am a Thelemite in broad strokes, at least. Let's put it that way. But the Gnostic Mass, I do find deep and meaningful, and it is a little taste of high church, if you will,
Oh, we'll have to study up on it.
within all that. Yeah.
There's a book, Stellus Demonium, which is about the intersection of the Grimoire Demonology and celestial mechanics. They're very, very closely knit together the further back you look. But like line 2 or 3 or so of the introduction, wherever the introductor says, ritual is theater with an audience of one. And that's really useful because, like, a lot of ritual is building up suspension of disbelief, is telling stories for yourself. And even public ritual is very like the one-on-one experiences in people's minds, too. You can never really let go of what people are interpreting in their heads. As a ritual leader, you don't have too much control over that.
Right.
And again, I love public ritual. I've kind of emphasized that I don't really know where I fit in the grand scheme of things. But public ritual lets me be part of other people's spirituality and be part of their celebration and their moments, which is very helpful to me. I have a theory that there are almost no extroverted magical practitioners, like magic worker types.
Sure.
I've met one. He really scared me. I've never seen anybody with that focus and force of will. Also, he would randomly hump people, but led an amazing ritual before humping them randomly. I don't see that very often, and I kind of think you get one or the other. You get soft skills, social skills, and people magic, or you get that more magical ability to communicate with the transcendent. I think part of that is just saying extroverts don't have rich interior lives, which I will own that. But that's always been kind of like a little conflict for me. But public ritual, it doesn't necessarily have the magical power of a personal spell, but it lets you kind of guide people along a path that they can celebrate together. Whether or not anyone in the room believes, it is a place where they can touch the transcendent.
Sure.
I'm working on a ritual right now for a furry convention in a few weeks that's going to be based on the Thies werewolf trials, where people will take on kind of the mask, literally the mask of werewolves. I'm going to get some cute felt masks from Amazon and go into the underworld and try and bring back the light from the powers of darkness. Spoiler, I get to play the powers of darkness.
Okay. Nice. Good. Yeah, I think it's interesting. You mentioned being gay. Of course, I am also gay, and I do have the stereotypical frustrated high school theater queen gene in me, if you will, and so I relate to what you're saying about ritual. I mean, I'm basically introverted, except I have this weird thing. If you put me on stage, then I'm totally in my element.
Yeah, there are levels.
I know it's a strange contradiction there.
No, it's where do you get your energy? I get mine from people.
Yeah, but with ritual, I know for myself, I'm big in ritual, and I surprise people sometimes because I'm just not subtle with it.
But theater.
Yeah, exactly. It goes back, ancient Greece, if you will. The celebrations of Dionysus, theater and ritual and religion are all tied together directly. So, the other thing I think about is you're talking Jodorowsky, right? It has this wonderful what is it called? I want to say psychomagic, and that's not right. Anyway, part of the point of his book is when he works with his clients from a psychological background, he always gives them some sort of physical ritual. And some of them, when you read his examples, some of them sound just silly. But he gives them some kind of physical thing to do in a ritual sense, and it's tremendously impactful.
Well, your body and mind aren't separate. That's like the flaw of Cartesian dualism. They are the same entity. And I think we've had a mini argument about orthopraxy, the practice of religion as opposed to the faith of the belief in religion. And I know that orthopraxy is many ways like right living in kind of the Jewish traditional sense of like community guided by law and things like that. But also to some degree, it's, what are you doing with your hands? The physical aspects of faith. And to some degree, and I hope to a deep degree, spirituality and belief follows form and function.
Yeah, that's certainly the hope. Yeah. So you said you've found yourself drawn toward the dark side, as you call it, the left hand path,
Yeah.
and demonism, and I think one of the things I admire about that, and is that part of our problem, from a Jungian standpoint, if you ask me my personal opinion. I respect all people's faiths. I work with people from all different backgrounds. But just speaking personally, I feel that monotheism is psychologically unhealthy. And part of that is because it forces us to split off the dark side of the God.
Oh, yes, I think that's probably the case to some degree. I think it usefully makes you wrestle with the question of where does dark and evil come from. We're in we're in the world of theodicy here, and how Yahweh has related to evil changes constantly.
Right.
This is kind of interesting. I was reading the biography of God the other day, and it looks at God as a literary character, but specifically the author brings up the idea that the New Testament, brings up the idea that, let me rewind that a little bit, brings up the idea that the Christian Bible is written in a codex, in codices. It's written from left to right, or maybe right to left to right, in a series of books that you turn the pages of. So there's a very distinct order. But the Hebrew Bible was traditionally written in scrolls. And while there is generally a standard order to things, it's not really baked into the system. It's a little more free form, kind of what you feel is right and good. And one of his challenges in writing this book that looks at God as a literary character and his development is, do you choose? The Christian Bible tends to be, the flow is God the Creator, kind of people finding their identity with him, making the pact. That's not the right word. That's my word, not their word.
Right.
And then there's Job and spiritual conflict, and then God goes silent because you hit like Numbers, Chronicles, and these books that are more recapping or about the people, but not the people that are lost and trying to find their place, kind of almost without their God, or trying to find out where they are in a post-useful God environment. And then the Christian New Testament comes along as the answer to that. So it's creation, introspection, silence, exclamation point in the form of Jesus raising from the dead. But the way the scrolls tend to be ordered in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, is creation, introspection, where we are as a people, and then it concludes with Job. So basically, the trial of God as a just creator is the final denouement of the Hebrew Bible. And so there is no kind of Jesus is the answer thing. The biggest question of how do we reconcile ourselves with God as a source of good and evil is the final closing piece. There's a beautiful prayer, which I do not have in my head right now, but it's a Mesopotamian prayer. It's called like the prayer to the unknown God, something along those general lines. And the language is along the lines of, I wish I could read this. It's, I have made all of my sacrifices and still I suffer. I have, vocal fry, and still I suffer. I have asked the priests for help and I have no answers that work. People, I'm in pain, I'm suffering. Who do I turn to? Because I've turned to everyone. Just give me an answer. And monotheism, as a technology, it has the answer. Whether you are on good terms or bad terms with God, whether you're suffering or have plenty, you can align yourself with God through ritual, through right living, through the commandments, through honoring him, through the pledges you made to him, the contracts. And in this way, monotheism is a major technological advance over polytheism because there are answers. And again, answers are kind of what religion's first task is, providing those. So there's a place for monotheism if you can answer those questions. That question of is why evil? And that's a question that Christianity has not successfully answered. 2,000 years, they still can't do it. But
Yeah.
I don't think it's an answerable question.
Yeah. I mean, the Gnostics gave it a good try.
Oh, yeah. It was very simple answers they have in the Gnostic Church, too. Clear as day.
Well, yeah, when we say Gnostics, we can't say that's one group
Fair.
by any means. But, I mean, of course, your podcast, you've been talking about the demiurge.
Yeah, he's kind of hot.
And, yeah. And, I think that's an interesting approach.
Yeah, we keep going. I think it's going to be at least 2 more episodes because we can't reach an end on it. There's just so much there. But the demiurge is, in some ways, a Satan figure. Not always. Depends on what day you're looking at it.
Sure.
But I think he feeds into our understanding of Satan. And one of his names is Samael, who is also the main Jewish name for Satan. Also big and dumb. I respect that.
Yeah, I find I do find that approach an interesting one. If you are going to deal with monotheism, then the idea of a lesser being who thinks it's the God.
Soft dualism.
Yeah, this idea that demiurge believes itself to be the supreme being, and is fumbling with that.
Yeah.
It is an interesting approach.
I kind of wish I could go back to monotheism. I liked the idea of knowing where I was going to go when I die. That's useful. I still don't know. And even if I believed everything I said or did at my altar or something, I still wouldn't know.
Sure. So that gets us to kind of where you're at now. And again, this idea of exploring the shadow side, exploring the left hand. Say more about that, and what that's been like for you, what you've learned from it.
So something I was about to interrupt you with is that, generally speaking, people don't ask God for things. You do not ask God for babes, bucks, and a Buick.
Right.
You don't really ask Diana for those things either, although there's a little more gratification in there. Pleasure is a little more allowable in neo-paganism. But you can ask, to some degree, you can ask saints for babes, bucks, and a Buick because they're very human. They understand us. And in any spirit hierarchy that involves them, demons are spirits that are closest to us. And they really do understand us. Some of them were us. Asmodeus is half human in some stories. And you can turn to them and ask them for things, for babes, bucks, and Buicks. The editor of Crowley's Goetia, modern paperback edition that you can get on Amazon, says that Goetic magic is somewhere between selling your soul and addiction to the Ouija board, and generally trash talks it over and over again, despite editing a book on the Goetia.
Right.
And Crowley also kind of trashes the Goetia as well, while saying they're basically a psychological tool.
Sure.
I'm babbling, but there's a long tradition of the sky god hating on the faith of the home and the personal faith. Certainly it's true in all of Christianity. Sky god hates personal faith type stuff. But it goes back to at least the Olympic gods and the Chthonic gods. The high church that was ceremonial abstract really was down on the home practices and the path that involved sorcery. It's one of the reasons the Goans, the Greek magi, the Greek magicians, were kind of trash talked and seen as being tacky, without saying they were wrong in their beliefs. But this base belief that you can turn to the spirits for babes, bucks, and Buicks, it's never really faded. And that's that Cartesian dualism on some level, I think, again. So I kind of found that the world of demons, besides just being appealing, interesting, having stories that are like there and reachable and just fascinating to me, those creatures, whoever they are, whatever they are, they understand humans to a degree that Yah or Ra or Zeus doesn't. If they were deities, they're not deities now. They're on our level, and they can be tempting and offer us power that we can choose and be destructive in that, or they can walk beside you and give you guidance and knowledge of the liberal arts and good familiars.
Yeah, sure.
So that kind of approachable human level interaction, I think it's what I really needed. But again, I do tend to lean dark, and I found just the hooves and horns really appealing. My patron is Buer, who's looks like a lion pinwheel. Weird little guy, but I adore him. His myth probably goes back to the centaur Chiron, who is a teacher. And as an academic type person who works in a college, I found that very appealing as well. He's also very sober, which, as someone who just never gets around to drinking, also kind of appeals. I was reading someone posted one of the standard kind of troll messages in one of the various demonology forums I'm on, said, "Are there any good demons?" And like half the responses were, "There are no good demons. They're all bad." And a quarter of the responses were, "Let's qualify the concept of good and evil. Demons are amoral." But like 10 of the responses were, "Buer."
Nice.
He really is a sweetie.
Okay. Yeah, I love hearing this because the stereotype of demonism is of course the extreme, the dark,
Right.
the
It's
evil.
the Jack Chick version.
Exactly. And
Which because of Jack Chick, because of reinforcing prophecies and ideas, it does exist, but it's rare. People don't worship malevolent forces except in high school.
I was
Well,
going to
and
say,
certain arguments about Yahweh as well.
yeah. I mean, we do see people in the magical community on occasion who I like to call them edgelords.
Yeah,
The people
that's a term.
who you really get the sense are just doing performance art.
Oh, well, like Crowley?
Yeah, fair. Very fair.
But
Not
yeah,
to say
yeah, I
I'm a
see
terrible
that.
Crowleyite.
I see that. On the other hand, I went to the Satanic Temple, don't get the name wrong, the Satanic Temple's annual convention one year, and that was very ethical. I mean, they're basically atheists, but there was very ethical people. They just enjoyed wearing black and studs and things like that too. Like there was an embrace of the aesthetic without like any desire to sacrifice a chicken or something like that.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I had the same sort of experience. I visited the Satanic Temple headquarters last year,
Oh,
and very warm, welcoming.
yeah, they're nice people
Yeah,
with a good sense of humor.
I-
At the
yeah,
same time, I think that if you are particularly on a theistic left-hand path, you can say, "Oh, they're daemones and they're neutral forces, or they're guides and wisdom and things like that." But let's backtrack a little bit and also say a lot of the fun is wearing black and being a little bit of an edgelord. I totally don't identify as that, but it's there.
yeah,
I have tattoos of demon sigils on my shoulder and wear tank tops because I like to occasionally tweak people a little bit,
sure.
because it makes my mother distressed about me, which she's also very loving. But that's fun. The rebellion and the wearing black is a part of that world. And if you say it isn't, you need to take off the leather jacket.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I know you talk about tattoos. I have the same situation. I have an entire sleeve devoted to Dionysus,
Aw,
blessing the vineyard. And then my other sleeve is actually beings that I encountered in more shamanic trance sort of situations. And they are ancestral figures, and the only thing they're wearing is a mask of a deer skull.
oh,
And I get people just randomly wanting to know what that is. And it's always interesting having to answer that question
I
and giving different levels of answers depending on who's asking.
I don't think a magical practitioner should tattoo demon sigils on their shoulders. I'll just put that out there because you're really kind of sacrificing a certain level of your autonomy, magically
Sure.
speaking, to
Hmm.
a third party. And there's an interesting like divide in terms of like modern demonolatry, which is the kind of the Solomonic idea of like demons are allies to be controlled and
Hmm.
negotiated with and bargained with, but all the power tends to be in the practitioner's hands. And that's a very sorcery practitioner path.
Hmm.
And then I think maybe more with the teeny bopper demonologists and the modern like Llewellyn type publications, there's more of a worship and pact driven thing. It's much more like what I lost when I got rid of Yahweh in my life and needed to
Hmm.
fill that hole. A few of my sorcerer friends have said, "Don't give up your spiritual autonomy." And I said, "Oh well, too late on that." But I've never been able to cast a spell that worked for anybody except other people, so it doesn't really matter that much to me.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, yeah, I think that's a really good point. I had a teacher who referred to tattoos as blood oaths, and
Yeah,
and
I can
and,
see
and
that.
she was not criticizing. She was talking about that the fact that tattoo is transformative.
Hmm.
It is ritual in and of itself. I know for me, I've been careful to choose tattoo artists who get that.
Yeah, same. My tattoos are all the entities in my personal pantheon and on my altar, so I kind
Mhm.
of like had the goal of having an altar that I could wear.
Yeah.
That's been that's been my little tattoo quest. Also, my tattoo artist is like, "You're 49, dude. Why are you suddenly here all of a sudden?" It's like, we both like demons. Let's work with that.
There you go. Yeah, I didn't get my first tattoo till I was 40. And again, that's because I was part of a religious tradition that said that that was a terrible thing to do to the body.
Well, and you can rebel against that. It's fun.
Yeah. Honestly, my first tattoo was an act of reclamation. I mean, on the one hand, yes, I wanted a tattoo for years, but it was actually a really powerful statement of claiming authority over my body and saying that nobody was going to tell me how I may or may not use my body. And of course, this was all wrapped up in coming out as gay at the time as well.
Yeah. Ooh, late starter on that one.
Oh, yes, definitely.
That happens.
Yes.
My first one was my tattoo of Boer, and his name and sigil, and
Mhm.
what used to be part of Psalm 28, but is now entirely blasphemous. That's his invocation thing. And then my most recent one, my very sweet Mormon neighbor bought me for Christmas. It's a crown for him. And she's like, "This is obviously important to you. I'm not sure I agree with you on it, but I know that you'll appreciate it and you'll think of me when you see it." It's
Oh,
true. Very sweet of her.
that's wonderful. It's very nice. So, I think one thing that comes up for me in this conversation is the image of Faust.
Okay. Yes.
And and
Complex.
and it is. And of course that's, admittedly part of what I've been studying and in working with Jung and where magic shows up in Jung's work.
Hmm.
And I find myself curious, as a demonologist, or is that the correct word? Maybe
There's a
not.
few words.
Right.
Demonologist would be someone who studies
Right.
demonology, but also has
Yeah.
a strong Christian spiritual warfare vibe now.
I was going to say that's why I just hesitated.
And demonolator is technically like one who worships demons, but the words
Okay,
really heavily overlap. And I
sure.
probably am like a lot of column A and a lot of column B.
Okay. So working in that world, playing in that world,
Hmm.
what about the Faust myth? What about the proverbial, the stories going back hundreds of years of the danger, of the potential risks?
The concept of making a pact with the devil is very Christian charged.
Hmm.
The first story about that would have been some bishop in like some priest in like 500 whose name I cannot remember, but he
Yeah, I want
was
to say it's
upset that
Bartholomew, but that's not right. It's something
it's
like
long.
that,
It's a
though.
name like that.
Yeah.
He was passed over promotion to bishop despite being an
Mhm.
extremely nice and qualified person. Got a little pissed out about that and sold his soul, and became bishop. Then he felt guilty about it, and Mary came back and gave him back his contract, and they tore it up, and then he died 3 days later. So it's a parable about pride, I guess, envy, and the fall, and then redemption as well. Later on, you get to Cyprian, who's one of the better known Pact with the Devil stories. He's a very powerful sorcerer, strongly modeled on like Aladdin's lamp and genie type stuff. You can see that in the subtext of his magic. And he wants all this power. He has all this power, but someone asked him to cast a love spell on a sweet little girl person, and he tries, but she like panics and crosses herself, and the spell fails.
Mhm.
And he's like, what has more power over magic than I do? What is this faith that she has? And then he crosses himself, and all of his pacts burst away, and he's free. It's interesting that the Grimoire of Saint Cyprian has on page, let's say, 50, a spell of magic at the cost of your eternal soul, and you'll be damned and damned and damned. Then the next page has the story of, but if you make the cross, it'll all go away, and you're fine. I think that's a little bit self-serving.
Yeah.
And then, later stories, the pact with the devil is a Christian myth. And it's from that world.
Yeah.
First thing like a pact that would be that would be like the person casting it would see as a deal with the devil is in the Grand Grimoire, the Red Dragon Grimoire, one of the 1700s grimoires that's actually contemporary with Faust, and that has a very complex ritual where you enter into a fairly controlled pact with Lucifuge Rockefeller, and then through him to Lucifer to get like a large amount of silver every month forever, and you pay him back 1 penny or something, like some token payment. And if you break that token payment, then you owe your soul to the devil. But there's so many layers of protection that it's like, if you believe the magic, it's going to be impossible for anybody to reclaim on that. So even that is like the person is in control of the demons, not the other way around.
Sure.
I don't think until the 20th century do you get to some idiot writing their name on a pact and selling their soul to the devil in exchange for, I don't know. I say some idiot because I'm referring to myself, not the general category of left-hand practitioners. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, I don't think that the deal with the devil myth has anything to do with demonolatry as I understand it, because it just doesn't. Yeah. As a story, though, Faust is really powerful and dark, because I think it's a statement against intellect and pride and humanism and rationalism. The academic wizard was kind of the mode of wizardry at the time. Mm-hmm. This is like the end goal of a lot of scholasticism and monasticism, is this kind of power. And remember that magic and demonolatry and theurgy and all these things, they were legitimate scientific exploration paths.
Sure.
At the time, less so now. Mm-hmm. And I think that Faust is very faith affirming. Again, if you believe that being an academic is fundamentally a sin, which you can make an argument. But at the end of Faust, he's damned to hell. There is no point in time where he couldn't have just done a cross and confessed and made good with God. I think the idea that you can always be redeemed is very powerful and very helpful if you need to be redeemed. Mm-hmm. And salvation theology is very harmful, I think, but it's what some people have and what they hold on to. So Faust is powerful as a story, as a metaphor. As an academic type, I do find it challenging, and I don't like the subtext of what it says, particularly in the current era. Mm-hmm. Right. But it is a powerful story.
Yeah. I think it's interesting, though, that that it's always the divine feminine that shows up in these stories as the redemption agent. Whether it's Mary in the case of this early bishop, or in Goethe's Faust, it's Marguerite.
Okay.
Her appeals, which is why Jung hated Goethe's Faust.
Interesting.
In terms of the ending, because he felt it was a cheap out. Basically he felt that Faust was foolish to enter into this and therefore should have had the consequences.
Well, he is, but it's kind of like the modern comics code. The bad guy has to suffer and get deleted. But I think that the questions Faust leaves open for the even vaguely intelligent reader is a question about redemption and whether redemption is for me, whether redemption is possible. What can God forgive? God can forgive quite a lot.
Sure.
And just because it's not directly answered in the script doesn't mean it's not out there in the open for anybody to see that path.
Right.
I was kind of upset that the degree to which the devil and demons don't like gays, that bothered me because, as it's one of the standard sins, but gay is so bad that it can be used, like the presence of gay will drive demons from a room. in medieval witch hunting demonology type thing.
That's kind of that. That's interesting.
Yeah. It's in the Hammer of Witches, the Malleus Maleficarum.
Okay.
Basically, it's first off, it's just so bad that why would anybody do that? And obviously, being gay is just the worst thing in the universe. Also, and this is I can't remember the name, but Malleus Maleficarum again. Jesus was male, and so why would he do that to himself? Anyway,
right. So this journey from the Episcopalian baptism on up through modern demonolatry, what are the key learnings? What are the standout things that you've learned about spirituality in the course of all this?
There are paths that don't require much of you besides, lighting a candle or something like that. And you make your own discipline. But Buer is a teacher, and I teach. I have the podcast, I give lectures, and I work with my community as well. I try and be a teacher and support people in that way, and that's important to me. I probably would have done it anyway, but for me it is kind of a discipline, and I'm holding on to that. I am okay with having a spirituality that's for other people and not necessarily for myself, except to kind of give me vague, warm feelings. Public magic is about the audience, not about the ritualists so much. And I think you can never really discount your effect on other people's paths. I know before I even really believed in anything, I kind of inadvertently converted 2 people to demon worship, and that made them happy. I was a little unsettled by that. Less so now, but I still wouldn't recommend it as like a path for a newbie.
Sure.
That's just kind of dangerous, and the amount of discernment involved in any left-hand path is so high that new people shouldn't go down that road. That's like safety goes off sort of thing.
Right.
But I mean, you find meaning where you want to. I also kind of feel like there's some ties between outright demon worship and BDSM that are kind of amusing, and I'm going to have to address those internally. But that's always kind of there for me a little bit. It's weird how gay the left-hand path is. I'm from the furry fandom, and that's easily 60% some variety of queer. But I go to the Satanic Temples conference, and it's 80%, and that's weird. It feels odd to be in a place where I'm looking around saying, this is pretty gay. Yeah. I don't know what the connection there is, except that rebellion is baked into being queer.
I think that's true. I think that if you find yourself violating this huge social norm, which, it's becoming less and less so, but particularly for some of us that are a little older, you find yourself violating this major social norm, then it does free you to question other social norms.
And, to the degree that I'm out there and in public about these things, I haven't really talked to my family about them too much, but they know that there's something a little bit bent in me on this regard. Hard not to. It's been kind of good to be open. One of my, favorite, I have no choice but to be open about these things, demon worship moments, is at that the Satan conference that you and I attended in North Saskatchewan? No,
Halifax.
In Halifax. I was going there as a podcaster. I knew that a portion of the people there had already heard my podcast because it was in the program, and a couple of people had said, "Yeah, I'm listening to that on my way over. Good stuff, bad stuff, whatever." But I was out there in who I was, and I'm slightly sleazy demon worshiper is one of my personas, and so I was out there. I had my Boer sigil on. It was pretty transparent where I fell on the magical spectrum, but a lot of people were not doing that in their lives. They were in academia. A lot of the practitioners were not open about themselves. But as I was walking around, kind of being like fairly blatant about this, one or two of them reached into their shirt and pulled out their sigils and showed them to me. It's like, me too. And it made me feel like I had this connection to the necromantic clerical underground, where people were sharing their dark sides in this kind of secret network and coming out to each other. And that was kind of neat.
Yeah, that was kind of my impression there too, is that everybody showed up and they had their academic suits
right
on.
But took a day to get past that.
And yeah, it's like after we all started to talk to each other, all of a sudden, so many people there were practitioners.
Yeah, it was neat. Well, they had that.
Yeah, but we all had to let our guard down.
And another really powerful moment in this world, one of my friends is a religious studies person. She's very polycultural and all over the place. And I'd helped her build her, the altar that you have for the Day of the Dead. I don't know what it's called.
Oh,
what?
Ofrenda.
Ofrenda, yeah, that's the word. It was really important to her, and I helped her build it and got a lot of the components for it. She was kind of poor. We had a lot of conversations, and she knew kind of where I am in my spiritual path, which is a big old question mark with horns. Mm-hmm. And while we were building that, she says, "Okay, I want you to do something for me. I want you to hang a ribbon." And I said, "Okay." She said, "This ribbon is for the people that died in the witch hunt and the witch trials, and for people that can and will face that persecution, and I want you to tie it."
Wow.
And that was someone who knew the right thing to say at the right time to help me kind of wrestle with some of the things that are always running through my head. It was really a powerful thing to do, and to kind of own that part of being a persecuted path. Mm-hmm. That was really useful. That was a little transformative really, in a small way.
Yeah, I mean, that's beautiful that she gave you that opportunity.
Yeah, it was neat.
Yes.
But I'm also learning that the battle against agnosticism is one that may take me a lifetime to overcome. And that my patron is more likely to show up in my friend's house than in mine, apparently, which is kind of irritating.
All right. I'll be on the watch.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Jacob. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
To converse, and you're a person that we could spend hours and hours just going back and forth with ideas and such. But I've so much enjoyed your podcast for that reason.
Aw, thank you.
And I appreciate you bringing both your intellect and your felt experience to this conversation. So thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and I look forward to talking with you in the future.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Reflective Soul Podcast. If this conversation resonated with you, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. When you do, please leave a review and share the podcast with your friends. Remember that your support helps this community grow and reach others who are seeking a deeper connection between themselves, the sacred, and the world around them. If you find yourself wanting to engage with more of my work, you can also find my spiritual guidance practice along with some of my writings at www.drnicklatursky.com. You can also follow me as Dr. Nick Latursky on Facebook or Blue Sky. Until next time, I'm Dr. Nick Latursky, reminding you to trust your journey, honor your inner wisdom, and embrace the beauty of discovery. Be well.